My family told everyone I failed. I sat quietly at my brother's engagement dinner. Then his fiancée looked at me and whispered, "Wait, you're—" The room stopped. Even my mother couldn't speak. My name is Harper Quinn. I'm 31. I live in Chicago, and according to most of my family, I am a massive disappointment. They think I threw away a brilliant future the moment I dropped out of Columbia Law after just one semester. What they don't know is that I've spent the last 6 years quietly building a tech company from my studio apartment, one that now serves over 300 healthcare facilities across the country, and just signed a $200 million acquisition deal. They still believe I'm between jobs or working some low-level IT gig. I let them believe that not because I'm ashamed, but because I needed space to grow without their judgment clouding everything. I used to think I'd eventually prove them wrong, but somewhere along the way, I realized I didn't need to. I was already doing the work. The company I built Next Wave started as an idea, scribbled on a napkin at a coffee shop, and turned into a platform that's helping doctors communicate more clearly with patients. It wasn't a straight line. I ate too many $1 ramen cups. I coded until my wrists ached. I took freelance gigs just to cover rent, while my parents kept asking if I'd reconsider law school. They thought ambition meant climbing someone else's ladder. I decided to build my own. I won't lie. There were nights when their voices echoed louder than my own. Every family dinner, where my brother got praise for some new medical award, while I quietly passed the potatoes, made me question if I was just chasing a fantasy. But something in me refused to quit. Not out of spite, not even to prove them wrong. I just couldn't walk away from something that felt this right. So I stayed quiet. I stopped trying to explain myself. I stopped expecting them to see me. I focused on building brick by brick, one late night after another. And in the quiet, something powerful happened. I started seeing myself. This isn't a story about revenge. It's not about getting even. It's about what happens when you stop waiting for permission to live your life and start writing your own blueprint. And it's about a dinner party where everything I'd kept hidden was suddenly dragged into the spotlight by the one person I least expected. If you've ever been underestimated, misunderstood, or told your dreams weren't serious, I think you'll understand. This is the story of how I stopped trying to be someone my family would approve of and became someone I'm actually proud to be. I grew up in Fairmount, a suburb so manicured it looked like a movie set. Every lawn was edged to perfection. Every parent drove a luxury SUV and spoke fluent college admissions strategy by the time their kids hit middle school. In our house, expectations weren't just high. They were the oxygen. My dad was a heart surgeon with his name on research papers I couldn't pronounce. My mum could take down a corporate merger before breakfast. And my brother Ethan was the golden child in every possible sense, varsity athlete, straight-A student, future doctor, already shadowing surgeons by 15. Meanwhile, I liked to tinker with broken electronics and read manuals for fun. I once taught myself JavaScript at 13 and built a dumb little quiz app about our family dog. I thought it was brilliant. My parents thought it was a fun distraction. Our family dinners were never just meals. They were status reports. What did everyone achieve today was my mum's version of grace before we dug into our organic, professionally plated food. Ethan always had something to report: lab awards, published essays, internship offers. I once mentioned a blog I'd started about coding tutorials. My dad blinked and said, "But how will that help your debate resume?" It was never cruel, just clinical. They treated my passions like a personality quirk, something I'd outgrow once I got serious. I tried. I joined Model UN. I signed up for AP Chemistry. But my heart wasn't in it, and it showed. My bedroom was the only place I felt like myself. While Ethan's walls were covered with medals and certificates, mine had printouts of app interfaces and whiteboards full of scribbled wireframes. I used to fall asleep with my laptop on my chest, YouTube tutorials still playing. When I won a regional coding competition at 16, I came home buzzing, holding my first place trophy like it was proof I belonged. My parents were hosting a party for Ethan's early acceptance into med school. I got a distracted, "That's wonderful honey" from my dad as he refilled someone's wine glass. It became a pattern. Every time I stepped forward, they were already celebrating someone else. I stopped sharing after a while. What was the point? My mum once said, "We just want what's best for you, Harper." What she meant was, we want you to want what we understand. And what they understood was law medicine and measurable success. I spent most of high school feeling like I was auditioning for a part I was never going to get. My guidance counselor called me well-rounded, which was code for doesn't fit the mold. I applied to Columbia Law because that's what they wanted. I dropped out in less than a semester because I couldn't breathe. Looking back, I don't think they ever saw me. Not really. I was the blurry one in the family photo, the one they couldn't quite focus on. Not because I didn't have potential, but because my version of success came in a language they never learned. There's a particular kind of loneliness in being the only person in your family who doesn't feel like they belong. But over time, that loneliness turned into something else, a quiet fire. A reason to prove, if only to myself, that not all ambition looks the same. Dropping out of Columbia Law wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a rebellion. It was survival. I remember standing outside the admissions office, staring at the city skyline, and realizing I had spent my whole life climbing the wrong mountain. I didn't tell my parents right away. I booked a one-way ticket home, transferred to Illinois State, and quietly enrolled in their computer science program. They thought it was a phase. Something I'd get out of my system before I came to my senses. "You're too smart for tech support," my mum said when I told her I was studying databases. My dad didn't say anything, just sighed like I'd dropped a glass at dinner. But for the first time, I could breathe. I wasn't fighting to stay afloat in a sea of Latin legal terms. I was building things, real things, apps, interfaces, tools. I started staying late in the computer lab, working through bugs, until my vision blurred. I finally felt like I was speaking a language I didn't have to translate. That's where I met Jade. We were paired on a project in our software architecture class. She was blunt, fast-talking, and could debug in real time while explaining the logic out loud. I liked her immediately. We started grabbing coffee after class, then stayed up past midnight sketching ideas on her whiteboard. Jade's mum had lupus. We talked a lot about how broken the healthcare system was, especially when it came to communication. Doctors who didn't share records, patients who didn't understand the instructions. She told me, "These systems aren't made for people. They're made for billing." That hit me. We decided to build something better, something simple, something human, a platform that connected doctors, patients, and caretakers in one streamlined space. We called it Next Wave. It sounded futuristic and hopeful. Jade's parents let us convert their garage into a workspace. They brought us food, asked questions, cheered us on like we were building a spaceship. It was the kind of support I didn't know families could give. Meanwhile, my parents were telling people I was taking a break from school and exploring options. I didn't correct them. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was tired. Tired of explaining a world they refused to understand. Every time I tried to share, they'd pivot the conversation to something safer. Ethan's latest publication, my uncle's new law firm. I became background noise in my own story. Still, we kept building. We entered student competitions and won just enough prize money to file our first patent. One of the judges introduced us to a hospital admin named Dr. Grace Lynn. She saw our prototype and said, "You might actually be onto something." She became our first client. We weren't making real money yet. I took side gigs designing websites and fixing laptops. Jade worked part-time at a bookstore. We lived on instant noodles and grocery store coffee. But we were moving forward. Every line of code, every test run, every maybe from a potential client felt like momentum. Back home, I'd get texts from my mum about job fairs and clerical openings. My dad left me voicemails asking if I needed help polishing my resume. They thought I was floundering. What they didn't realize was that I was finally building something of my own. There's a strange kind of pain that comes from being invisible to the people who raised you. It's not loud. It's slow and dull, like erosion. You start second-guessing even the wins. When Jade and I signed our first small contract with a regional clinic, I told my mum, hoping she'd be proud. Her response, "That's nice, but don't you think it's time to think long-term?" So I stopped sharing. I compartmentalized. My parents got the polite version of me, the surface-level updates. "Things are fine, just keeping busy. Still working on that little project?" Meanwhile, Next Wave was quietly growing. We got accepted into a tech accelerator. raised seed funding, hired our first engineer. I still paid rent with freelance money and wore my old college hoodie on Zoom calls, but the foundation was solid. I started calling myself the ghost founder. I liked being invisible. It gave me space, freedom. I didn't have to defend my choices. I could just work. There was power in that. Still, some nights I'd sit alone in our shared apartment, wondering what it would feel like to be seen. Not validated, just seen. To have someone look at the thing you've poured your soul into and say, I get it. I see why this matters. But then I'd open my laptop, see the messages from doctors, using our tool from patients, thanking us for making something that actually worked. And I'd remember. I wasn't doing this for applause. I was doing it because I believed in it. That belief carried me through the long nights, the ignored milestones, the endless explaining. It became my armor, my anchor. And even if no one in my family ever saw it, I knew what I was building, and I knew it mattered. The invitation arrived on a grey Wednesday, tucked inside a thick ivory envelope with gold embossing. My mother left a voicemail before I even opened it. Don't forget to RSVP early, Harper. The seating arrangement will be tight. It was for my brother Ethan's engagement dinner, an upscale black tie event at a restaurant that had a 3-month waitlist just to get on the call list. I stared at the card like it was a summons. Another evening where I'd be asked what I was up to these days and offered networking tips by uncles who thought it meant fixing printers. The next day, my mum called again. This time, it was about my outfit. Harper, you don't want to look too relaxed. Julia's family is quite polished, and it's important you make a good impression. Her voice was the same mix of concern and condescension I'd heard my whole life. I assured her I'd wear something appropriate and hung up before I said something I'd regret. I tried to push it out of my mind. I had deadlines, investor calls, and a beta rollout in 2 weeks, but her words lingered like static in the back of my brain. I hadn't seen my extended family in almost a year. The last time my cousin asked if I was still between gigs. I'd smiled and nodded, even though we'd just signed our biggest contract yet. Jade noticed I was off. Dinner drama, she asked, passing me a mug of reheated coffee. Engagement dinner, I corrected, and explained the situation. She gave a low whistle. You gonna tell them yet? I shook my head. What's the point? That night, as I reviewed our acquisition term sheet from Horizon Health Tech, a name in the email signature stopped me cold. Julia R. Lawson, Director of Strategic Acquisitions. Lawson. That couldn't be a coincidence. I opened LinkedIn, searched the name. There she was. Julia Renee Lawson, NYU Stern MBA. Director of Strategic Acquisitions at Horizon Health Tech. Engaged to Ethan Michaels. My brother's fiancée was the person leading the talks to buy my company for over $200 million. I sat back, heart thudding. The odds were almost laughable. Horizon had been circling for months, slowly ramping up interest. We'd gone through legal reviews, multiple NDAs, and back-channel phone calls. I'd kept my name off most of the paperwork. Jade had been our public face in initial conversations, but Julia, she'd be at the final stage. She might already know more about my company than anyone in my family ever has. I texted Jade, "You won't believe who's marrying my brother." A minute later she called, "No way." I could hear her pacing. "Does she know who you are? Not yet," I said. "But she will." I didn't sleep much that night. My brain kept looping through worst-case scenarios. What if Julia recognized me during dinner? What if she didn't? What if my parents found out from someone else that their lost cause daughter was about to become one of the youngest women to sell a health tech company at this scale? The next morning, I called my childhood friend, Mara. She'd known me since braces and bad bangs. I laid it all out for her. The dinner, Julia, Horizon, the secret. She listened quietly, then said, "This could go sideways, Harper, or it could go exactly how it needs to." I wasn't sure what that meant, but it stayed with me. My mum called again 2 days later, this time about shoes. "You'll want to wear something classic. Julia has impeccable taste." I said I'd handle it, and thanked her before she could give me a list of acceptable brands. Then I sat at my desk staring at our growing list of hospital clients, wondering how I could be running something this big, and still feel like a background character at my own family's table. Later that afternoon, I forwarded Julia's LinkedIn to Jade. "It's her. It's really her," I typed. Jade replied with a single line, "This is going to be good." I wasn't sure if she meant dramatic, chaotic, or karmic. Probably all three. In the days leading up to the dinner, I went quiet, focused on work, let my mum's voicemails pile up. She was deep into planning mode, listing which cousins would sit near, which aunts, suggesting conversation topics, and reminding me that Julia's father was extremely well connected in pharma. On Friday, a courier delivered a final version of the offer letter from Horizon. It was generous, $215 million, with conditions that would let Jade and me retain operational roles post-acquisition. I stared at the number like it belonged to someone else. The dinner was on Sunday. I picked out a black dress that was sleek but simple. No brand logos, no flashy jewelry. I wanted to walk in quietly grounded and impossible to ignore. Not because of what I wore, but because of who I'd become. As I zipped up my garment bag and checked the dinner address one last time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not dread, not fear, just readiness. The kind that comes after years of being overlooked, underestimated, and finally deciding you have nothing left to prove. The restaurant was all soft lighting and quiet money, the kind of place with valet-only parking and a menu you needed a magnifying glass to read. I arrived exactly on time. Not early enough to get roped into setup, not late enough to cause a stir. The hostess smiled, checked her list, and led me to a private dining room filled with people who had never really seen me. My mother air-kissed my cheek and immediately adjusted the collar on my dress. "Glad you found something elegant," she said. Her eyes flicked to my shoes. Very understated. Translation, not Chanel, not what Julia's wearing. I scanned the room. Ethan stood by the bar, laughing too loudly, shaking hands with someone who looked exactly like an investment banker. Julia was across the room, tall and graceful, in a navy sheath dress, chatting with her parents. She hadn't noticed me yet. Good. I found my place card. Table 3. Far corner. Next to cousin Becca, who still called coding that computer stuff. My mother had done her social engineering again. The seating chart was a chessboard, and I was a pawn off to the side. Dinner began with polite clinks of glasses and carefully rehearsed toasts. My father spoke first, praising Ethan for his exemplary path in medicine, and Julia for her achievements in the corporate world. His voice caught a little when he said legacy, as if this marriage sealed it. My mother followed with a rundown of Ethan's accolades from high school valedictorian to Harvard Medical. Not a single mention of me. Not even a polite nod to my presence. I wasn't surprised. I'd learned not to expect anything. The first course was set down some kind of artisanal salad with edible flowers, and the small talk began. Becca asked if I was still doing remote work, her tone full of sympathy. I said I was in health tech. She smiled like I'd said I was a barista with big dreams. My uncle leaned in. "Ethan says you've got a lead on something at Apple. Good for you. Entry level is a great foot in the door." I didn't correct him. It wasn't worth it. From across the room, I caught Julia looking at me. Her head tilted slightly, like she was trying to place a face she half remembered. I looked away, took a sip of my water. The second course arrived. I nodded politely through more questions about job interviews I never took. Then it happened. "Excuse me," Julia said, loud enough to rise above the hum of conversation. "I'm sorry, but is your name Harper Michaels?" Everyone turned. Forks paused midair. My brother froze beside her. I nodded slowly. "Yes." Julia blinked. "Wait. Are you Harper Michaels, the founder of Next Wave?" Her voice cracked just a little at the end. The room went still. Even the servers stopped moving. I met her gaze. "Yes, that's me." Someone dropped a spoon. My dad lowered his wineglass, his face blank. My mum stared like I'd spoken in another language. Julia sat back, eyes wide. I said, "You're Harper Michaels from the Horizon acquisition file. You built the communications platform we've been trying to compete with for 2 years." Ethan opened his mouth and then closed it again. "Wait," he said. "You built Next Wave." I nodded again. "Co-founded. 6 years ago. We're in over 300 hospitals now." Julia let out a breath. "That's incredible. You're the ghost founder. You've been negotiating with us anonymously. She turned to Ethan. Do you realize what this means? He just stared at me. You told me you worked in a call center. I never said that, I replied. You assumed. My mother finally spoke. But why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked, I said. Not really. And it was easier to let you believe what you wanted. My father cleared his throat. $200 million, he asked Julia, his voice a whisper. 215, she corrected. And that's just the offer on the table. It could go higher. She looked back at me. We've been trying to reverse engineer your system for months. You built something extraordinary. The silence broke like glass. Relatives leaned in, asked questions, and offered congratulations. My mother mentioned how I always liked puzzles as a child. My father claimed he knew all along I'd do something special. Ethan still looked like he'd been hit by a truck, but I stayed calm, grounded. Not smug, not gloating, just present. This was the moment I'd imagined and feared. The reveal, the gasp, the recalibration. And now that it was here, it felt less like triumph and more like exhale. Julia reached for her wine. I'm sorry if I put you on the spot, she said. I had no idea. You're kind of a legend. I smiled finally. It's okay. I think this dinner needed a little shake-up. She laughed, and the tension cracked enough for dessert to be served. But nothing was the same after that. My seat might have been at the kiddie table, but my story had just rewritten the whole room. The texts started coming in before I even got home. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years suddenly remembered I existed. One uncle asked if I'd look over his startup idea, and another wanted advice on investing. By morning, my phone was a scroll of praise, half apologies, and thinly veiled curiosity. My mum's message was waiting at the top. Brunch at the Regency. 11 a.m. Please come. We need to talk. I stared at it for a full minute before replying, okay. The restaurant was one of those quiet, upscale places with white tablecloths and jazz playing low in the background. My parents were already seated when I arrived, dressed like they were attending a business meeting, not brunch. My dad stood when he saw me, hesitated, then gave me an awkward hug. You look well, he said, as if surprised. My mum beamed. Darling, we've been reading all about Next Wave. The user metrics, the impact reports. It's amazing. Why didn't you tell us? I sat, took a breath and answered gently. Because you never asked, not with real interest. They looked taken aback. My father frowned. We've always supported you. You supported a version of me, I said. The one who followed your script, not the one I actually became. The waiter came and poured coffee, buying us a moment to regroup. When he left, my mother leaned forward. We just didn't understand. Tech always felt uncertain. That's fair, I said, but it doesn't excuse treating my work like a phase or a fallback plan. My dad folded his napkin with unnecessary precision. Look at what you've accomplished. Maybe our pressure helped drive you. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Or maybe I succeeded in spite of it. They blinked and for once didn't argue. The rest of the brunch was a mix of pride, defensiveness, and awkward attempts at connection. They asked about my office, my employees, and my co-founder. I answered honestly, but without trying to impress them. After we paid the check and stood to leave, my mother touched my arm. We're proud of you, Harper, truly. I nodded. It was something even if it came years late. That night, Ethan showed up at my apartment with a bottle of wine and no warning. I figured we should talk, he said. You free? I let him in. He stood in my living room for a long moment looking at everything. This place is incredible, he said quietly. I didn't realize... I had no idea. I sat on the couch and patted the seat beside me. You never asked. He sank down next to me. I'm sorry. I think I liked being the successful one. It made me feel safe. I appreciated his honesty. I understand. We were all just trying to survive in that house. He nodded slowly. I'm proud of you, Harper. Not just for the company, for doing it your way. That meant more than he probably realized. We talked for hours for the first time as equals. Not as a golden child and disappointment, but as siblings finally meeting each other halfway. Recognition is strange when it arrives too late. It's like a light being turned on in a room you already left. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired, and ready to move forward on my terms. These days, life feels steadier. Not simple, not perfect, but grounded. The acquisition went through, and I now lead a division at Horizon focused on innovation in patient care. My days are filled with strategy calls, product roadmaps, and mentoring. I host monthly workshops for high school girls interested in STEM because I remember what it felt like to be the girl no one took seriously. Watching them light up when their code works feels more fulfilling than any headline ever could. My relationship with my parents is still a work in progress. We talk more now and sometimes even understand each other. Other times, I still catch the old flicker of confusion in their eyes when I explain what I do. But I'm not waiting for them to catch up anymore. I know who I am, and I know what I've built. And for the first time, that's enough. The money was never the point. Neither was the recognition, although it helped. The real success was learning to trust myself when no one else did. When I think about those years in the garage, eating ramen with Jade and building something out of nothing, I feel proud. Not just because of what came after, but because we kept going when no one was watching. That's a kind of strength no one can give you and no one can take away. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or dismissed, I want you to know your story isn't over. Keep building, keep growing. And if you've had your own moment of quiet strength, I'd love to hear it. Drop a comment. Let's remind each other that sometimes the most powerful victories are the ones that happen long before anyone notices.